Can you be too shy in sports, in particular football? Can you be too non-engaging in which it undermines your ability to perform at a high level? Do you believe that can be a thing?
Yes, that can absolutely be a thing. You can be too shy depending on the position you play and what is expected of you. I've said for a while that everybody wants people who follow the rules and listen to the coaches, and everybody's like, oh, the young kids, they got to follow the rules. You want respect for authority. I don't always encourage that. I encourage a little bit of rule breaking if
Agreed.
you are the leader if you can wear the mantle properly. I'm sorry, 1997, my best example. If Peyton Manning and Philip Fulmer are having a disagreement on something to do, I think Peyton Manning should be the one to have the final say, not Philip Fulmer. Y'all can call me crazy on that.
Probably was on offense a lot of the time. Today's tough question brought to you by Rick Terry Jewelry Design. They want to be your jeweler looking for the affordable game day jewelry. How about the Fire Opals, a Tennessee tradition? RickTerryJewelry.com. Look over my shoulder and see those awesome pendants that they have with the Tennessee, with a Fire Opal right in the middle over Knoxville. You're going to love them. So check them out. Now, with Nico Iamaleava in particular, he is a guy that has not been out in front of the camera a lot. Part of that is because his money's guaranteed, whereas a guy like Cooper Mays or somebody else has to go out and earn their money from the individual collectives or they don't get paid. So there is that. We do have to factor in that Nico doesn't have to go out to be popular. He's going to be popular anyway. And by being as popular as he is, if he shows up at an event, there's going to be 50 million people surrounding him.
Yes, and for the context, guys, we're talking about this because there have been questions about Nico Iamaleava's assertiveness, shall we say.
And the coaches brought it up, too. They said they wanted him to have more conversations with the other players. This is not something we're pulling out of thin air. This is something that they want him to be more assertive as a leader. Again, that's nitpicking. He's, we think, a great prospect, but he does need to be more assertive as a leader.
Yes. I mean, again, this is what we talk. A guy like Nico, and I can just give it to you. You need his leadership to carry guys with him. And here's what I've said with quarterbacks. Just following the rules isn't going to get you to where you want to go. You have to have moxie. And I'm going to give you, and I don't just want to say this because they were both Polynesian, but I am a Titans fan, and he was the Heisman winner of 2014. When my Titans drafted Marcus Mariota, he never took that next step. Why? Because Marcus Mariota, all he ever did was what he was told. And everybody thought, that's so great. He listens to the coaches. He's a hard worker. But Dave, don't you agree that in the fourth quarter, you need that moment where the quarterback says, I'm not just going to do what I'm told. I'm going to grab the team by and grab the team by its throat and carry them to victory. And you I know it's an intangible, but you need that vibe. And you never got that vibe with Marcus Mariota. And you will need a moment like that with Nico, won't you? You needed a moment like that with Hendon Hooker. I know Hendon Hooker always did what he was told, but didn't you feel like in that Alabama game, he took the team by its throat in the fourth quarter and said, I'll drag this team to victory if I have to?
You want a little bit of Brett Favre in this day and age. Now, Brett Favre used to be the quarterback that I did not want ever for my favorite team. I don't care who my favorite team was, because he'd throw, it seemed like, as many interceptions as he would touchdown passes. Now
he's intercepting welfare money. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm not saying that you ever want to get to that point where you're throwing even comparable interceptions. However, in this day and age of aggressive offensive football, I probably want my guy to err on the side of being aggressive more than I did in the 90s and part of the 2000s, where I didn't want him to make mistakes. I'm okay with mistakes now because I think you can overcome it because the rules benefit the offense. So, Caleb, I've pretty much done a 180 on where I stood as far as I wanted a quarterback who didn't make mistakes. I didn't care if his personality was in your face or not. I was fine with that. But now I think it's a little bit different. I think you're right. I think you want a quarterback that's in the fourth quarter saying, hey, I'm not afraid to try to stick that ball in there, and I think I can make it, even though that's probably not the best throw that I should make according to the playbook.
It also depends on how your team is constructed.
Yes.
Because you're right. In 90, we talked about Peyton Manning. Now, T. Martin was a leader, but I'd say T. Martin was probably a quiet leader, right? He was kind of a quiet guy. But that worked because that defense was so, like, the leader of that team was Al Wilson. And that was a defensive-oriented team.
And let's be honest, too. T got a lot of love. Why? Because Peyton got a whole lot of love. Okay?
Yes, exactly.
And some players resented that slightly. So T benefited from that.
That's very true. And T wasn't scared of the moment. It's not like he backed down, but it did feel like he was kind of a do-what-you're-told type of quarterback, which was fine in 1998 when you're a defensive-oriented team. But Josh Heupel's offense is quarterback-dependent. And so you can't really have that. The quarterback has to be the leader. I always bring up, we always talk all the time about Steve Spurrier and his, run in the 90s and the fact that he only got one one national title out of it. Dave, I think part of the reason he only got one national title is too many of his quarterbacks were do-what-you're-told type of quarterbacks and not actually be a leader. When you say is that not fair to say with Spurrier's quarterbacks most of the time?
Yes.
They just did what they were told.
Yes. They were not leadership guys. And a conversation on the message board that I find very interesting. Dylan says Hendon Hooker wasn't really a raw leader. People followed him for what he did on the field. They will follow Nico for the same reason. Smoky Mountain Red says Hendon was the nice guy until he crossed that line. That dude wanted to rip your heart and stomp it on the field. Dylan, I love you. You're one of my favorite posters, but I'm going with SMR right there. I think, I don't think that James Banks felt real good about crossing Hendon Hooker before the South Carolina game because all the Jeremy Banks, excuse me, because the other players rallied around him. I think that's the sign of a good leader. I think that he was willing to get in people's faces. I think there's a misconception out there, frankly, because he was openly Christian, that he was just a super nice guy. He was a nice guy, but sometimes business ain't always nice. And he was business, and he got the job done. So I don't think that Hendon Hooker was ever too soft to be an effective leader.
Nobody understands. People always get that mistake. There's who you are off the field and who you are on the field. And this, Dave, when you get on the field of the court, you can go into a trance and become a totally different person. Did you ever see Hendon Hooker when he ever tucked the ball and ran, he would run into linemen and linebackers and he would get in the face of whoever tackled him. Remember that? He was ready to fight. Okay.
There's one time on the goal line. Was it Alabama that I think he was?
I think it was Florida.
Was it Florida?
Florida got tackled by a guy twice his size, and he was ready to fight him afterward because on the field, Hooker went into a trance, and he wasn't that same guy off the field.
I completely agree with that. Now, Smoky Mountain Red, though, said, I think it's way too early to call this from the outside looking in. He has only led the team once in live action. I agree. And please don't let this turn into like a Milton thing in which you think I just don't like him for some personal reason. But there is concern that he hasn't been at as many functions and that sorts of things as he should be. But let's remember, a quarterback is supposed to be somewhat of a diva. The bottom line is divas believe they can stand in the pocket on 4th down and 13 and complete a 15-yard pass and win a football game. So all of this being said, I'm not saying it's bad. If he's a little bit of a diva, that's just fine by me. I got no issue with
that.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
It's funny because Peyton Manning was a born, honestly, bit of a diva, just a leader from like the start. But we talked on the phone about this, Dave. Tom Brady, Tom Brady was a quiet guy and really kind of rode the coattails as the backup quarterback, rode the coattails of the Patriots to that first Super Bowl. I would argue maybe the first 3 Super Bowls. But he developed into a leader over time, and maybe that's what you could see from Nico Iamaleava. Maybe what he has to do is start winning, and then his confidence in leadership will grow. But sometimes you can't force it on people. I don't know if you know this story, and this is why he should have been fired. But I would have said he should have been fired, but I kind of get it.
Can I take 1 second and separate one thing you said?
Sure.
I'm not worried about the leadership at all. Maybe the excitement and that sort of thing. But the leadership, I think he's a good leader.
Well, part of being a leader, though, is to break from your coaches and to take the control of the team at certain times and to force them to follow you. And that's what I mean.
Okay.
And so do you remember CJ Watson?
Very well, yeah.
The point guard for Tennessee basketball. Buzz Peterson was frustrated that he wasn't a leader. So he sent him to a camp to become a vocal leader before his junior year. Well, newsflash, it didn't work out, guys.
Yeah, I talked to CJ about that a few months ago, and that wasn't great. And he wasn't a big fan of that. And the quiet storm was rumbling a little bit over that decision. It's funny you bring him up. He was at the tip-off club, and he didn't like that decision at all. And I can tell you, had he had another year under Bruce Pearl, I don't know that Bruce Pearl would have had to wait to get to Auburn to make a Final Four. The show represented by Banks and Jones. Banks and Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, play to win. Banks and Jones.